Welcome back. South Sudan has threatened to quit the OPEC group if it interferes with its ability to meet its ambitious oil production plans. That's the warning from the country's first vice president, Riek Machar. Speaking at an industry conference in the capital, Juba, Machar said that South Sudan's petroleum minister has had difficulties with OPEC Plus over its crude oil targets. South Sudan has ambitious plans to increase crude oil production to 230,000 barrels per day by 2024. The country's August production cap, agreed to by OPEC Plus, was significantly below that at 130,000 barrels per day. According to estimates, its actual production for August, however, came in at 160,000 barrels per day. OPEC Plus has been criticized in recent months for not increasing production quickly enough amid the tight global crude market following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Nevertheless, an internal OPEC Plus technical committee report states that South Sudan accounts for around half of the coalition's overproduction to date. In August, OPEC Plus producers were estimated to have produced 3.4 million barrels per day, less than their quotas allowed. OPEC Plus has still asked members who overproduced their quota to make up for their past overproduction by making additional production cuts before the end of the year, when the deal is set to expire. And to speak to us through this, Energy Expert NJ Ayuk, who is the Executive Chairman of the African Energy Chamber. He joins us from Juba in South Sudan. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Perhaps let's just step back, take it from a layman's term, and explain to us, given the context that we've just mentioned, that there is a need for more oil production. Why is this a problem, and why is South Sudan at loggerheads with OPEC Plus?
Well, I think South Sudan is at loggerhead with OPEC Plus right now because OPEC wants South Sudan to produce more. The world wants South Sudan to produce more because at the moment, every citizen around Africa, around the world, is feeling the pressure at the pump. Oil prices are increasing. Demand for oil has increased a lot. Supply is very limited. And in that case, we need oil producers to be able to ramp up production, to produce more oil in the market so that the price at the pump could reduce for everyday citizens. Everyday citizens around the world, including South Africa, are feeling the pressure whenever they want to buy any kind of petroleum products. And that affects even our lives when it comes into flying, when it comes into driving, and when it comes into us running industries. The price of everything skyrockets. And so South Sudan, as a petroleum producer, has to play its own role in increasing production. Don't forget, this country used to produce about 350,000 barrels. Right now, it's about 160,000. It has to double that production so that it can meet world demand and it can really supply the world.
So if all are in agreement that South Sudan should produce more, why is South Sudan threatening to quit the alliance if it's prevented from meeting its targets, that of producing more?
South Sudan is not going to quit the OPEC Plus alliance. You know, the way the OPEC Plus alliance works is sometimes they will require countries to cut production. And if you're an African country producing 170,000 barrels on average a day, and you have just come out of crisis, you need that cash to be able to run government budgets. And so sometimes OPEC would require you to do a contribution of a cut of about 5,000 barrels. For Saudi Arabia, that is nothing because they're producing 12 million barrels to 5 million people. For South Sudan, a war-torn country that is on recovery, if they have to cut 5,000 barrels, that is a lot of money that they will be losing per day. So you imagine 5,000 barrels at $100 per barrel. It's a lot of money for them. So they are always disputing that. But OPEC has a good way to handle that. There's going to be exemptions, there's going to be waivers, but it's better to stay within that OPEC Plus family, because it did save the oil industry and save humanity whenever we had big problems across the globe. And as it's doing right now, we want to increase production. Everybody should increase production so that the market can be stabilized. We don't want a volatile oil market. We want a more stable oil market because it's good for citizens and it's good for producers as well.
And that's what I want to understand, NJ, given the current conditions, why is this a time to call on South Sudan to cut back on production? And perhaps if you could do that by explaining the system to us, how it's worked out, how much you get to produce, and why then there ought to be times when you have to sign a waiver or scale down on production.
I think the vice president said that was a statement. This crisis arose during the oil price war last year, where you had Russia and Saudi Arabia fighting on the cuts, and South Sudan had to take that, and the vice president has not forgotten that. But that's 1 year ago. That was yesterday. Today, at this present moment, I think they're fully inclined. I have been here. I've spent the last 3 days here with the minister, with the first vice president, with all their ministers. They are fully behind OPEC and the OPEC Plus and the declaration of cooperation. So they are not leaving. They are going to be within this marriage. What is really hurting right now is the United States of American sanctions on South Sudan's oil industry. That is hurting further investment in haze oil recovery, petroleum supplies, petroleum technology, to spike up production. Here we are at a global world where we're saying that we wanted sanctions against this country so they could have peace. Now they have peace, it is time for those sanctions to go, because even if South Sudan has to move to a green economy, as the world wants in the future, it needs to produce its oil, then drive that up. But today we need oil so that we can serve citizens. We have a crisis right now. We need to be freeing up oil capacity, shoring up oil production so that we can reduce volatility and everyday people can feel that the pressure is being reduced. So there's going to be some good news coming. And don't forget, South Africa is going to invest heavily in South Sudan's oil production to really see how it can also fix its own energy security issues.
And how the quotas worked out? Is it by consensus, or are the more powerful countries who get better privileges? How's it worked out?
The bigger producers like Russia and Saudi Arabia get to cut more. The smaller, because Russia is producing about 8 to 10 million, Saudi Arabia is producing about 12 million. The entire African continent is producing about 7.8 million average daily. And the largest producers right now, like Nigeria, which should be about 2 million, is producing 1 million. And Angola, we used to be about 1.6, is producing 1.1 million right now. You cannot expect African countries to cut the same amount of oil as Saudi Arabia with 5 million persons in population and 12 million in production. They can do more. They can do more of a cut, and the Saudis are doing more of that. The Saudis are taking a bigger percentile of these cuts. The cuts required for African countries are very small. So per country, per where you see, they have to balance that so that the price for oil cannot drive right down to $40. So, if oil is at $40 today, most African countries can produce because they will not be able to meet the cost of production. I would say that in an oil man's world, prices are great at $60 or $70. $100 is a little bit too high because we have to be very careful about consumers and also producers. So South Sudan is going to be just fine. Angola is going to be just fine. Don't forget, Nigeria, for example, is being asked to increase production. They don't have capacity because of underinvestment. So African countries are fine when it comes to this, and we are going to have one big family, but we need to increase production. That is the challenge, not necessarily cuts right now.
Thanks for your time, NJ Ayuk, who's the Executive Chairman of the Africa Energy Chamber. Let's leave it there for now. We are back again with more news. Do stay with the Globe.